working on this third floor. I don't know what I should add.
Why do you keep on crashing?
I don't know. It's annoying. I know.
So it's it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 wide.
I really need to find some scrap. Need 2 more copper, then I can pull this off.
Okay, so you know the profile pic.
What do you mean, like?
For an account.
Uh-huh, yeah, sure.
Who's talking?
Viewer.
Oh.
I'm getting low.
I got go sorry.
Don't apologize.
Breaking vines. I'm not gonna break vines. It's no use.
I don't want to continue this. Hopefully it doesn't lag my internet.
Pilot's helmet and examined his skull for any visible damage. They then examined the helmet and found 2 large impact points. It seemed to have done its job, but the fall distance was just too much. Marcel was gravely injured. Jack then left the group to see if he could find the cable and try to figure out what had happened. As he stepped away, all the men could hear were the loose rocks he dislodged as he walked and the awful heavy breathing coming from Marcel. He discovered that the bolt that held the metal loop cable together had slowly loosened over time from the vibration, and eventually it slipped, causing Marcel to fall from the cable.
What?
That giant room you made, what's that gonna be for?
Giant what?
That giant room you made.
Nah, just use it for cobblestone.
And probably enchanting too. Yay, back to mine and mine and mine and on. I'm gonna put it in or no, I'm gonna leave it in.
Then took the telephone cable that was attached to the large winch cable and plugged it into the headphones to radio the surface. He told the surface team that Marcel had fallen about an hour prior and he was seriously injured. They then passed the phone to the team doctor, who asked a couple of questions about Marcel's condition. Jack relayed that Marcel had been unconscious since falling. He was taking 58 breaths per minute, he was drooling and gurgling, and it looked as though his upper jaw was fractured.
Do you have any iron on you, Rich?
The doctor told Jack to keep him completely immobile and to keep him warm, and then told him that he would come down as soon as he could once the cable was brought up and repaired. And so, the long wait began. At around noon that day, the cable started to be pulled back to the surface. When empty, the winch could pull the entire length of the cable in about an hour. So, between the repairs and the descent, Marcel. All the while, Marcel's frantic breathing continued as he struggled to stay alive. At the same time, the men hoped that he wouldn't regain consciousness before the doctor arrived, so that he wouldn't have to suffer through all of his injuries without any painkillers. Hours passed, and there was no sight of the cable. And with the telephone cable now detached from the winch cable, the signal was poor and it was difficult to understand what was being said by both parties. Then, at 5 p.m., the line went completely dead, and so they sat there with no knowledge of how much longer they would have to wait. At 8 p.m., 3 hours later, Marcel's violent panting started to cause foamy phlegm to come out of his mouth and nostrils, and so the others used a damp cloth to wipe his mouth and nose. At 9 p.m., there was still no contact with the surface, and the men decided to start resting in shifts to conserve their energy. Finally, 12 hours later, at 9:30 a.m. the following morning, the cable began to move, and they heard Andre Perry communicating with the surface as he was lowered down into the shaft. Eventually, they were able to see the small yellow circle of his Minuteman descend into view. With him, he had a medical bag and a large metal stretcher attached to his harness. They helped him to unhook as he touched down in the cave, and for the first time since Marcel had fallen, the men felt some hope of getting him out alive. This was quickly shattered when Andre came over to Marcel. He looked at the injured man very briefly, pouted his lips, nodded slightly, and said, "No, he's lost." Confused, the men asked Andre what he meant, and Andre would go on to explain that.
What do you mean? What do you mean? What do you not get from that? Lost? Dead?
They thought that his helmet had spared them, but in reality, the blood that had come from his nose was a sign that he had fractured his skull in the fall. Despite this awful news, the men pleaded with Andre to do everything he could to save Marcel, and so Andre got to work and administered a number of syringes, and then began inspecting Marcel's body to see what could be done to help him. The first thing he noticed was an open fracture on Marcel's left arm, and he thought it was best to cast it before Marcel was lifted out of the cave. He then had Beppo hold on to Marcel's wrist, and on 3, they both pulled to set the bone back into place. While he worked to create a cast, Andre would tell them about the events that transpired on the surface that led to radio silence and why it took so long for them to finally hoist him down. First, at 5 p.m., there was a plane that flew into the area to drop supplies, and everyone abandoned the winch to flag down the plane and retrieve what had been dropped.
Floodlight.
At the same time, a storm had started that got progressively worse throughout the night.
Oh
At
boy.
some point, the tent that was set up over the winch was ripped away.
Damn it! I'm an idiot. You see, there's aluminum alloy right... What is wrong with me? Oh my god, I'm an idiot. There's aluminum alloy right here. Do not know how long this is gonna take, but I need to make 2 of these. I need to get iron.
Until the following morning when conditions finally calmed down that Andre was finally able to be lowered safely. After casting Marcel's arm, the men discussed the next task, which would be lifting Marcel onto the stretcher. Suddenly, there was a noise off in the distance, and the men recognized it to be the unmistakable sound of rocks coming down into the shaft. They quickly put their arms behind their heads and knelt forward over Marcel's body, and then the rock hit the boulders at the bottom of the shaft and exploded into fragments that whipped by them. When they straightened up, Andre explained that the team on the surface was likely beginning to fix ladders along the side of the shaft. The surface team would attempt to get ladders as far down as possible into the shaft to help the stretcher to get around narrow spots and overhangs. But this would come at the cost of occasionally knocking rocks off of the wall and tumbling down below. The men then got to work on moving Marcel into the stretcher that Andre had brought down with him. All 4 of the men slowly lifted Marcel from the cot where he had laid since the day prior. This was an incredibly difficult process because of his weight and the precision that they had to use to make sure his spine moved as little as possible. One wrong move, one slip, anything, and Marcel might be paralyzed forever. They would eventually manage to get him onto the stretcher and began fastening him in to ensure that... Thankfully, Andre had thought of just about everything before descending into the cave. He brought a special harness to fasten Marcel in, and he had drilled holes near the head to fasten the helmet into place, ensuring his head wouldn't sway as he moved. Finally, Marcel was ready to be hoisted. He would just need a final plasma infusion, and then the hoisting could begin. Above them, they could hear the whistles of the men on ladders as they got deeper and deeper into the chasm. The plan was to have 4 teams evenly distributed across the length of the chasm to ensure a safe ascent. The whistles of the men above them gave the team down below a renewed sense of hope and brotherhood. They also felt a sense of gratitude that so many individuals would risk their lives to help them save Marcel. Meanwhile, Andre gathered all of the tubes and syringes and laid them out before Marcel in preparation for the transfusion. Then he grabbed Marcel's arm, stretched it out, and started the transfusion. Millimeter by millimeter, the plasma slowly drained into the injured Marcel. When it was finally finished, Andre had a terrible realization. He wasn't sure whether to hoist Marcel right side up or upside down.
Keep going, keep going, keep going.
Additionally, if they decided upside down was best, how would they keep the phlegm that he was excreting from choking him as he ascended? He radioed up to the surface to speak with one of the doctors. He spoke first to the Spanish doctor, who wasn't sure either. He then spoke to a mounted doctor from a nearby village who gave no clear answer once again. Finally, he spoke with a friend of Marcel's, a doctor who had flown in from France to help in any way they could. The two men spoke for a few minutes, and then Andre said, "Good, you can hoist him whenever you want." They stood in silence for a second, and then Marcel made a very small moan, and then a second, and then a third. And then, horribly, the violent panting stopped, and Marcel exhaled for a final time. 5 minutes later, the phone rang on the surface, and Jack spoke and said, "Marcel Lubin is dead." Yes, he died 5 minutes ago. He then took the headphones off and looked at his watch and determined that Marcel had died on August 14th at 10:15 p.m., 36 hours after he had fallen. The men decided that with Marcel now deceased, they would sleep the night in the cave and figure out what to do the following morning. They made one last contact with the surface and told them that they would be in contact at 9 a.m. the next day. The following morning, the group decided that it no longer made sense to lift Marcel out of the cave. It just wouldn't make sense to risk all of their lives in these subpar conditions. When Marcel had been clinging desperately to life, yes, but not anymore. At some point down the road, with the right equipment, Marcel's body could be hoisted from the chasm, but for now, he would be buried in La Verna cave. Andre found a narrow crevice in the rock a little ways away from the camp, and then the men brought the stretcher over and placed Marcel's body into the opening. They then placed layers of gravel over the body, and then large rocks after that. Finally, Jack chiseled out a cross, a name, and a date to the left of where Marcel was buried. The men would spend the next night in the cave as well, after spending the day preparing and burying the body of Marcel. First man to be hoisted out of the cave the following day was Jack. This time, the hoist had been checked and reinforced meticulously to ensure no one else would suffer a similar fate. Upon finally reaching the exit, the men
Damn it, this is annoying.
sense of relief, because despite knowing that everything had been reinforced, there was still a sense of anxiety from the ordeal they had endured in the past week. The next to be lifted late that afternoon was Beppo. He reached the spot right where Marcel had fallen, and then the winch stopped. For more than half an hour he was stuck there as they repaired something on the surface. This was obviously nerve-wracking for the men below, but eventually he too was lifted from the chasm. The group collectively decided that it would take one more day for the final two men to be retrieved from the cave, so Haroun and Andre spent one final night 1,100 feet underground. The first man to be hoisted the following day was Haroun. After clipping into the harness, he said goodbye to Marcel and to Andre, and then was lifted into the dark abyss. As should be expected by now, the winch broke down once again, trapping Haroun midway up the chasm in the path of a waterfall. Thoroughly out of patience, Haroun screamed at the winch operators to get him out of there, but there was nothing they could do. He would spend the next 2 hours and 20 minutes in the middle of a chasm, in almost complete darkness, hanging by an invisible thread. Finally, the cable started moving again, and Haroun escaped the awful abyss. Unfortunately, due to the delay and more issues with the winch, Andre had to spend one final night alone in La Verre Cave with the dead body of Marcel Lubin. His ascent would go smoothly, and this was the end of the fateful expedition. The following year, in August of 1953, a new expedition was led into La Verre Cave. This time, an entirely new winch was manufactured and installed at the mouth of the chasm. On the 8th of August, Marcel's childhood hero Norbert descended with an aluminum container. 2 days later, Marcel's body was placed into the container and cremated 1,100 feet under the ground in La Verre Cave. At the bottom of the chasm, near the camp of the fateful expedition, burned into the rock, it says, "Here, Marcel Lubin lived the last days of his courageous life." Hello everyone, and welcome to Scary Interesting. If you made it this far, I just wanted to thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, I hope you'll check out some of the other videos on my channel that are similar to this one. This is part 5 of my ongoing series, Cave Exploring Gone Wrong. If you want to support the channel, go ahead and give this video a like and drop a comment down below. If you're new here, I hope you'll consider subscribing to my channel so you don't miss any of my weekly videos. And once again, thank you so much for watching, and hopefully I will see you in the next one.
Two men fell into an ice crevice on Mount Rainier. Oh God.
Firestone takes care of the cars that take care of all of us. Whether it's making sure pizza night goes off without a hitch or making the neighborhood safer for everyone.
We help the people that help the people.
Firestone Complete Auto Care.
Adobe?
Jim Davidson and Mike Price were descending from the 14,000-foot Mount Rainier when the ground beneath them gave way and they plummeted 80 feet into an ice crevasse. And this was just the beginning of their ordeal. Jim Davidson was born in Concord, Massachusetts in 1963. As a kid, he worked with his father, who was an industrial painter. By the age of 9, he was already working the occasional 40-hour work week with his father, scraping paint and cleaning paintbrushes for 10 cents an hour. At only 12 years old, he was holding the safety lines for his father as his father ran across slanted rooftops, coating them with tar. His father taught him all about meticulously checking your knots and your safety gear to ensure you and your partner are safe. In 1980, while attending the University of Massachusetts, Jim developed a love for the outdoors. He had little money to go on grander adventures, so he took to cross-country skiing and living vicariously through the
Big boy shredder.
library. He also
Now I can shred medium tier items, I'm not wrong.
decided he wanted to see if he had what it took to survive a winter camping trip. His first attempt was just a simple one-night stay in the woods near his house in the middle of winter. Jim decided against a tent and attempted to toughen himself up as quickly as he could. And on the night of January 27th, 1981, he successfully slept outside in the woods in just a sleeping bag. At 19 years old, he and a friend thought it would be fun to complete a snow climb of Mount Washington. Mount Washington is the tallest mountain in New England and stands at 6,288 feet tall. And as one of old, he and a friend thought it would be fun to complete a snow climb of Mount Washington. Mount Washington is the tallest mountain in New England and stands at 6,288 feet tall and is one of the windiest places in the entire world. It regularly sees winds of 100 miles per hour and held the record at 230 miles per hour set in 1934 for many years. With that in mind,
My God.
and hired a guide in March. As they ascended the lines headed route on Mount Washington, Jim crossed the tree line for the first time. The tree line is the elevation at which trees stop growing due to limited conditions. The day of their ascent, it was only 15 degrees and the winds were gusting at 25 miles per hour. Above the tree line, there was nothing but boulders and snow and strong gusty wind, but Jim was euphoric. He felt like this was exactly what he was meant to do. In September of 1982, Jim traveled west as part of the National Student Exchange Program to start at Montana State University. He was there officially for school, but unofficially, this was the beginning of his adventure in the Rocky Mountains. Jim had also already changed his major from engineering to geology and deliberately took a light course load so he would have lots of time for classes like snow avalanche dynamics, wilderness first aid, and cross-country skiing. He also went on to take courses in advanced rock climbing.
I love recycling in this game.
Outside of the classroom, all of his time and money was spent on climbing and learning to climb. It was also during this period one of those classes that he met a woman named Gloria. The two quickly fell in love and got married. That year after classes, Jim and some friends planned to send
Scrap it down, sell it off, get more air, get more resources, ensure my economic reign will last forever.
Smiling face with smiling eyes.
May not be the best placed. May not be like really well placed solar panels, but hey, better than nothing. I need iron. I'm gonna go get iron.
knowing that it was 4,000 feet higher than anything he had climbed before, and knew that glaciated mountains carried the additional risk of ice crevasses. This first attempt of Rainier would be unsuccessful. Poor weather during the attempt snapped the poles of their tent and forced them to turn around at 10,000 feet. The group spent 2 days in Seattle recuperating, and on a whim decided to climb Mount Baker instead. This is another glaciated mountain on the west coast, but stands at only 10,000 feet. This climb was successful, and over the next few years, Jim summited mountains all across the United States. His yearning for the mountains only grew stronger, and his dream to live in the Rockies was realized in 1986 when he moved to Fort Collins, Colorado to begin a master's degree in environmental geology at Colorado State University. Jim was also selected for a research assistant
I need a battery.
given a monthly salary and tuition waiver. This drastically changed his financial situation and put him in a position to take on an even bigger challenge. That year, Colorado University's outdoor program was hosting.
Go eat it. Eat. Nom 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 nom. Nom nom nom.
Happily accepted this new adventure.
Oh.
Prior to his departure for the expedition.
Thunk. 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 Let's go keep doing that till get power. Yeah, I know my base is messy. I'm trying to build a factory. Oh, whatever.
Jim and his group were driven to the airport by a man named Mike Price. Also a mountain climber, Mike was unable to afford the trip, but happily wished them the best of luck on their attempt. Fast forward, and Jim was 22,000 feet up on Aconcagua, and although exhausted and crushed by the altitude, Jim would summit the mountain and break his own altitude record by 8,000 feet. The other notable thing about this climb was Mike Price. Mike Price was born in Oklahoma, but moved around a lot as a kid and spent lots of time in Montana, Wyoming, and Colorado. It was during this time that he too grew to love the outdoors. Already by the age of 23, Mike was in the Yukon Territory, deep in the Canadian.
Hey, it's one of the dogs named after a Yukon. Well, it's named after a car.
Upon Jim's return from the expedition, the two of them got to be good friends, and at the end of Jim's semester, the two of them organized their first climb. On their climb, they found out that they worked well together, and this started a long climbing partnership. For the next few years, they climbed rock, snow, and ice, and developed a deep trust in each other's abilities. Although Mike was the better climber, they both pushed each other to climb increasingly difficult challenges. 5 years into their friendship, they sat in a bar exchanging stories and planning their next trip.
Bring me the lithium. That lithium is going to be used for batteries.
Naturally, all climbers talk about Nepal and the Himalayas at some point in their careers, but these seemed out of their league and out of their budget at this point. They also contemplated Grand Teton in Wyoming, but one mountain that kept popping into their conversation over the years was Mount Rainier, a climb that neither of them had successfully completed. Mount Rainier is just a picture-perfect mountain that dominates the Seattle skyline. It is also the most heavily glaciated peak in the lower 48 states.
That's a beautiful mountain.
More similar to that of a much larger peak. It also claims the lives of 2 to 3 people on average annually, and was the site of the worst climbing disaster in U.S. history when 11 people were swept away in an avalanche in 1981. It was exactly the challenge they were looking for, and so they began planning their ascent. 6 months later, they were completing their final preparations, and Jim called the National Park Service
Lithium
3 or 4 times to check the conditions. He learned that it was a low snow year.
I love lithium.
The Emmons and Carbon glaciers
because water doesn't.
And that it was unseasonably warm that year. Avalanche danger was low, but
that's the third time today I've accidentally died. They have. Did they like make the amount of fall damage you take increase or something? Ironically, it's about the little tiny shredder's got to get eaten by the big shredder.
Were melting due to the warmth, exposing many of the crevasses that lay hidden below the surface. Rainier has a total of 26 glaciers that slowly flow down the mountain. These are formed by the snow that falls year after year that doesn't completely melt in the summertime. This then packs down and compresses into ice, and over the years has become hundreds of feet thick. Due to the weight and the incline of the mountain, these large ice behemoths slowly flow downhill. The top 100 feet or so is under less pressure, and due to the movement of the ice, large cracks called crevasses that can be up to 10 feet across and 120 feet deep. Crevasses are particularly insidious because they are often covered by thin, breakable layers of snow that wait to consume unsuspecting climbers that accidentally miss a step. A fall into a crevasse has the potential to have the unsuspecting climber end up corked. This is when the climber rockets down to the bottom of the increasingly narrow walls of the crevasse, eventually jamming them between the walls like a cork, where they will either die on impact or succumb to the exposure thereafter. Mike and Jim prepared for the dangerous crevasses extensively. They prepared a system of pulleys to pull one another up from a crevasse should the other person fall in. The route that they would be taking is called the Liberty Ridge. This is a narrow spine that runs up the north face of Mount Rainier and is bordered on either side by thousands of foot drops known as the Willis Wall and the Liberty Wall. Above the ridge sits the Liberty Cap Glacier that constantly loses building-sized slabs that plummet down the mountain and explode into rock and ice. These explosions often cause a cascade of avalanches that sweep outward for a mile across the glaciers. Jim and Mike will first ascend 5,000 feet over 5 miles through forest and across 2 lower glaciers. This will put them right at the foot of the Liberty Ridge. Liberty Ridge is another vertical mile that they will climb tethered together and carrying 50 pounds of supplies each. On June 17th, Jim and Mike arrived at the Seattle airport and set off for Mount Rainier National Park. They pulled up to the ranger station and checked the weather and conditions on the mountain, and then filled out cards that listed their names, addresses, their route, and their emergency contact information. In the parking lot, they arranged their gear and planned for roughly 4 to 5 days round trip. Their food consisted of oatmeal, bagels, granola, nuts, raisins, macaroni, and noodles. Their supplies consisted of a stove, some fuel, helmets, and sleeping bags. They also brought an assortment of climbing gear like cams, carabiners, snow flukes, 7
I thought I had like one more bit of steel.
Decided against a tent to lighten their load by 7 pounds, anticipating good weather for their entire trip. On June 18th, they woke up early, ate some oatmeal, and left the camp wearing shorts and t-shirts following a large trail through the forest. At 5,500 feet, the trees thinned and they entered a grassy meadow. Eventually, the massive glaciers and rock faces appeared into view as the mountain rose 7,000 feet above them. They then arrived at the foot of the Winthrop Glacier, marking the beginning of the serious climbing. They changed into more clothing and then put on their harnesses, helmets, and crampons. Each of them carried 2 ice tools, 1 ice axe and 1 ice hammer. The front side on each is a pick that allows the climbers to dig in and pull themselves up. The backside of the ice hammer is a hammer that allows them to hammer in ice screws, and the backside of the ice axe is an adze designed for chopping ice. Jim and Mike then tied into 165 feet of rope, each carrying roughly 50 feet over one shoulder, with the remaining length separating the 2 of them. They then started making their way up the glacier, zigzagging around the crosses as they went. This took them to the Carbon Glacier and led them over the massive slippery ice boulders. Over this portion, they took turns leading and kept the rope taut, minimizing the fall distance if one of them slipped into a crevasse. As the sun reached the horizon, they set up camp on a flat spot between 2 crosses. They laid out their foam pads and sleeping bags as the cold night settled in. They woke up the following morning at first.
Can't imagine how cold it is up there.
After having breakfast. Finally, they reached the base of the Liberty Ridge. Mike was leading now and was swinging each tool back and forth, climbing up the ice. He was setting ice screws as he went, but the glacier at this altitude was more mud than ice and made for poor anchors. In one particularly precarious section, he looked back at Jim and yelled, "Don't fall." The implication of his words being that a fall would almost certainly rip the screws out of place and send them plummeting down the glacier. Jim replied that he understood, but was unsettled by the sternness in Mike's voice. After climbing some more, Mike looked back once again and with even more authority yelled again, "Do not fall." This route would prove to be a dead end, and they eventually had to backtrack and take a route that crossed the shady section of the mountain. In the shade, the ice was more solid and stable, making for safer climbing. At midday, they stopped briefly and watched rocks fall off the Willis Wall and explode into the glaciers below. Too far to tell the actual size, the rocks could have been van or even house-sized and caused small avalanches as they landed. Later on at around 5 p.m., after climbing up the rock wall, a massive ice expanse lay ahead of them. The angle of the ice was roughly 45 degrees and looked to stretch endlessly into the distance. They would need to find a flat spot before nightfall, because a fall or slip on this angle would send them careening down 2,500 feet and then right off of the Willis Wall. As night fell, they still hadn't found a flat area, and so they turned on their headlamps and set screws in the dark as they climbed along the ice. Finally, they found a small picnic table-sized spot of rock and ice that was flat enough but still sloped slightly. Due to the slope, they would need to sleep in their harnesses and stay tied to a screw throughout the night. In the morning, Jim woke up nervously to 500 feet of 45-degree angled incline on his right side. He heard Mike say
"No!"
and assumed he was looking at the same thing he was. In actuality, he was looking at the other side. In the darkness, they hadn't seen.
No, I don't have any. Yes!
Away from the almost 2,500-foot vertical drop of the Liberty Wall. They set off that morning without food and with little water because they couldn't set up the stove anymore. Finally, at 13,300 feet, tired and with headaches from the altitude, they found a flat spot to eat and melt snow with the stove. It would take them the rest of the day to traverse the next 800 vertical feet to just past the Liberty Cap. They considered summiting that day and sleeping on the summit, but Mike was dead tired from leading and didn't think he could make it. The following morning was June 21st, both Father's Day and the longest day of the year. Jim awoke and thought to himself that if all goes well and the weather holds, they'll have summited and descended by the end of today, and within 12 hours, they'll be off the mountain. They decided to leave their packs for the summit to travel lighter and would pick them up on the way down. The going was slow anyway because of the altitude, but eventually they crested a final rise and only 100 feet westward was the summit.
40.
They dropped their stuff at the top and hugged and congratulated each other. Luckily, they had managed to summit in between other groups of climbers and had the entire top to themselves. In the distance, they could see the other large cascades, Mount Adams, Mount St. Helens, and Mount Hood. As they soaked in the accomplishment, they took some pictures and watched as other climbers approached off in the distance. Eventually, another group reached the top and got a picture of Mike and Jim, and then they set off down the mountain at around 9 a.m. The descent is always much faster than the ascent. Not only are you carrying less gear, but you're working with gravity instead of against it. It had taken them 3 days to get up the mountain, but they hoped to be off the mountain by the end of the day. They were already at their packs within 30 minutes and stopped briefly to survey their descent route. The route they would descend was going to be slightly different than on the way up, and Jim was nervous about the possibility of crevasses based on the ice blocks
Crevice
off in the distance. They made the first section of the descent without brakes because of the precarious area they were in. As they reached the established trail made by other climbers that morning,
the extra chips packet.
sigh of relief.
I don't like
Finally
that.
comfortable enough to stop, they took a break and ate some of the little remaining food they had, which amounted to just some granola and some cheese. After that, they continued on along the foot-worn path. It wound its way back and forth, sometimes predictably around obvious crevasses, and then sometimes unpredictably and rather ominously for unknown reasons. Either way, they followed it fairly comfortably, knowing that it had withstood the weight of the climbers who had used it before them. At around 12,000 feet, they decided to glissade, which is essentially just sliding on your butt on a steep enough incline. This would allow them to travel quickly and rest their legs in the process. Jim and Mike eventually came upon a ridge in the snow that might suggest a drop-off ahead of them. Jim was in the lead and he stopped abruptly and snapped his arm up in the air. Mike then rolled over quickly onto his stomach, jammed the pick of his tool into the ground, and then jammed his crampons in next. This is a textbook position to stop a slide in the event of your partner falling into a crevasse. Jim then tepidly approached the ridge and peered over it to see the large, dark hole in the ground. He was now standing at the edge of a series of descending vertical ledges into a seemingly bottomless crevasse. Coming back over the ridge, he let Mike know what it was and that they would have to find another way around. Now at 11,000 feet, they figured roughly another hour and they'd be off the glacier, and then another couple hours after that, through the forest, they should be at the car by nightfall. They set off once again with Jim still in the lead. The snow felt good as he jammed the handle of his axe into it. Once he was satisfied with its firmness, he took another step. He then probed the surface once again, and it felt good, so he took another step. This time, his boot sunk in deeper into the snow. It didn't quite register exactly what was happening, but he began to tip forward and sink into the snow. Horrified, he realized he had just walked onto the snow bridge over a hidden crevasse. He then screamed, falling as loud as he could to warn Mike. He couldn't see him, but he assumed Mike was flopping onto the ground once again and digging in as hard as he could. Now up to his stomach, he swung his axe around trying to catch the edge of the crevasse, but it didn't take, and then he fell forward and smacked his head off the lip of the crevasse and then slipped down into the darkness below. In the split second he fell through the snow, he hoped it was just a small crevasse. A quick 10-foot fall and then climb out, and then they would continue on. No big deal. Then he was at 10 feet and gaining speed. He hoped the rope would jerk tight any second and Mike would stop his fall. Then he was at 20 feet, 30 feet. He was going too fast now. The rope jerked hard for...
Uh-huh.
Okay.
No. Good thing I have a battery system up on surface. Mm-mm.
A second, and he thought Mike dug in enough to stop him. A split second later, the tension was gone, and he continued descending rapidly. He knew that Mike had fallen into the crevasse as well, and now he was bouncing back and forth against the walls of the crevasse as his nylon jacket zipped across the ice as he fell. He hit the ground, and the wind was knocked out of him harder than he'd ever experienced in his entire life. Now resting, he wondered why he wasn't more badly hurt from a fall that distance. Just then, something wet landed on his face, then more on his stomach, then more on his face, and then he realized he was being buried in the snow.
Uh-oh.
Eventually, the sound was muffled around him, and he couldn't hear anything else landing on him. He opened his eyes, and he saw nothing. He breathed out, and the air hit him right back in the face. With that, he knew he'd soon be out of air, and the snow on top of him was too heavy to move. He tried to move his arms or sit up, but his back was jammed in the walls of the crevasse, preventing him from sitting up. He didn't even know which way was up, so he tried to spit and let it roll down his cheek. This indicated to him that he was still face up. Suddenly, he felt a warm wetness near his crotch. He was urinating from fear. Snapping back into it, Jim focused all of his energy into his stronger right arm and felt an ice block roll away. With that, his arm burst through the snow. He reached over to his face and frantically dug through the snow to try to uncover it. The air he was breathing was now stale, and he couldn't breathe. The crunching of the snow was becoming audible again as he was getting closer to his face, and eventually he could see through the snow as it thinned.
It's engraved in the side of that.
The snow out of his mouth. He was taking deep, gasping breaths as if he had just resurfaced from the water after being submerged for too long. As he caught his breath, he thought of Mike. He started screaming out for him and frantically started digging himself out, and then in his thrashing, he felt Mike's boot. He then realized that Mike had fallen behind him on top of the snow. He continued screaming Mike's name and told him that he was buried, and just then he heard Mike let out a muffled moan. He screamed again for him to get up and realized that at the very least he's stunned. At most, it's much, much worse. As he dug the snow away, he realized the snow was falling away behind him, and Mike's breathing was getting raspy now, a raspy sound that he'd never heard before. He screamed for him once again and managed to uncover his arms and torso. He screamed for Mike to breathe and heard that he was sputtering, and then a single exhale followed by silence. Jim froze, holding his breath, staring into the blackness. 5 seconds went by, and still no sound. He screamed out even more desperately, reached out and grabbed Mike's calf and shook it. And then in his panic, he let go of his ice axe and felt it slip past his head into just below.
Oh.
He then reached up and felt Mike's helmet, but that didn't make sense. Why were his feet and head so close together? He brushed away more snow and saw that Mike was on his back, facing up, and his legs were bent so far up that his feet were behind his ears. Jim reached into his mouth to pull out snow while screaming for him to respond.
Oh,
His cheek as hard
that
as
guy
he
has got like
could,
Vecnud.
He knew that he needed to start performing CPR.
That's
because
bad.
Mike was breathing, but he was fearful of a spine injury because of the way he landed. He figured that a spinal injury wouldn't matter if Mike was dead anyway, and so with that, he pushed his feet away, and Mike uncoiled slowly and his legs landed in the snow. He then grabbed Mike's head and breathed into his mouth. The air immediately shot right back out, and so he grabbed his head and tried once again. This time, he saw his chest rise and then fall. He knew that chest compressions were next, but he was still buried up to his sternum in snow, and so he grabbed Mike and pulled him on top of him so that he could squeeze his chest from behind. He then alternated between compressions and breaths, and the movement allowed him to pull himself out of the snow some more. Just then, he heard a rumbling above as more of the snow bridge collapsed and rocketed into the crevasse below. With more light in the crevasse now, Jim checked Mike's pupils, but they didn't adjust at all to the changing light. After a few more rounds of CPR, he knew he couldn't keep this up. Ordinarily, the person administering CPR would continue until someone could sub in or until rescuers arrived, but he knew no one was coming. He checked Mike's pulse for a final time and said out loud to himself, "I think he's gone." Jim then gently laid his head down on Mike's chest and shook with fear as tears welled up in his eyes. Another voice in his head told him he had to wait to mourn because he would die if he didn't escape the icy
Oh,
abyss.
that sucks.
He first dug himself out of the rust of the snow and then looked around to see how bad the situation was. Behind Mike's head, there was a drop-off deeper into the crevasse that seemed to continue forever in the darkness. He then looked back and forth to either side of the crevasse, hoping for a gentle slope from the ledge they were on that he could simply walk up out of. But on either side, it extended for hundreds of feet into nothing. Finally, he slowly lit up. The years he spent working with his father gave him a keen eye for judging height, and he estimated it to be about 80 feet. The slope started at 80 degrees, and then climbed to 90 degrees, and then near the top, over 90 degrees, to an overhang of just slick, smooth ice. He
Oh.
was horrified to see this because he had never climbed anything over 70 degrees before. Looking down now, he realized the ledge that they had landed on was composed of a small ice slab jutting out from the wall, and then his pack wedged between the slab and the other wall. Miraculously, the pack was the perfect width and landed perfectly placed to form the 2-foot by 7-foot ledge he and Mike were resting on. Realizing the precariousness of their situation and that this could give way at any second, he knew that he needed to anchor into the wall right away. So he grabbed an ice screw, grabbed his ice hammer, and then hammered it into the wall. Once the threads caught, he used the shaft of his hammer to twist it in the rest of the way. He then clipped himself into the screw, and then clipped Mike into the screw after that. Once he was properly anchored, he grabbed his light to survey the area more thoroughly. The blackness of the crevasse swallowed up the light as he moved his head around, and he was immediately freaked out even more into the wall. Next, he realized all of the gear was also at risk of falling, so he gathered it all up and then clipped both of the packs to the screws. He then looked up hopelessly at the sheer walls once again and had no idea what to do, and so he just started yelling for help. After yelling for a little while, he decided it was probably best to just think of another solution. In the warmth of the midday, melt water was pouring into the crevasse and onto him. He decided that the first thing he needed to do was get more clothing out of his pack and layer up to avoid hypothermia. He went to grab some of his clothing, and as he was pulling it out, a piece of the platform that he was on literally cleaved off
I know you're not
into the
lagging.
abyss below. So instead, he cut into the pack to avoid any unnecessary movement he was causing by opening the zipper. Now looking up at the wall instead, he wondered if there was any chance he could climb out. He then thought about how long it would take for rescue operations to start if he just decided to try to wait it out. He figured from the time that someone even noticed they were missing, it would be at least 2 or 3 days. From the time the rescue operations even began, it might take another 5 or 6 before they even find the crevasse, if they ever even found it. Realizing that between the lack of supplies and just the awfulness of having to spend 5 or 6 nights in the crevasse on that little ledge, he didn't think he could wait. It was now noon, and he figured that there was about 9 hours of sunlight left, and so he made the hard decision to try to climb the 80 feet out of the crevasse. He was still incredibly nervous.
Yeah, I'd be scared if I had to climb an 80-degree angle.
Do you know when you'll get on Minecraft?
I don't know.
What the frick was that? I heard a wow sound. What makes like a screaming sound? What mob does that? I heard like a wow sound outside my house. Do you know what mob makes that sound?
No.
There is boss, but I think it may be a boss. There's in the tree. Back to my AFK.
Found some.
Oh my god, this. Whatever you do, do not look up this guy named Extreme. Don't look up this guy's stream.
What is it?
It's one of those guys that have the weird thumbnails with him like, oh my gosh, this really works in Minecraft. And it says testing 100 Minecraft block facts in 24 hours. And it has fact 99. Oh my god, is that a gold amethyst, diamond amethyst, normal amethyst, and emerald amethyst? I'm gonna watch it cringe hard.
Where the hell did that thing go?
I don't care about home goods.
Oh, found it.
Marshall's ad. This lady She was at a, I forgot what kind of game it was, but this lady was at a game, right? And for kids, and they said no alcohol allowed. So she got these sleeves that covered them to make them look like sodas, like Sprite and Coke, but it's really alcohol.
Hmm.
No, I won't.
What they say?
Listen.
People believe it's impossible for a cactus to grow more than 3 blocks in Minecraft. But perfect timing, you can break the cactus just as it grows, and it will fly forever.
No, it won't.
Cactuses can grow more than 3 blocks when a world generates. You
People
cannot.
think, he literally said people think it's clickbait.
Hello.
These texts are clickbait. Yeah, you're clickbaiting people. By showing
A cactus in Minecraft can grow 3 blocks, but in world generation, it is possible for them to grow into a rare 4-block cactus or even rarer 5-block cactus.
I love your vids.
Thanks, dude.
Stupid. Shut up. Wow.
Oh god, that is cringe. Oh, this is not. Ever wanted a good video? Just don't look at your own videos. Goodness gracious.
I don't. Wait, what?
It is true.
So far.
Oh, bet.
Great. Yeah, you can craft underwater TNT with chemicals in Minecraft Education Edition.
Apparently, you can do it in Bedrock too. You can change it.
Yeah, you can do that in Bedrock. Bedrock's probably more better for Education Edition than Java. Oh crap. Well, duh. There's a lot of that right there. I think I'm underneath. Oh, there's a lot of it right here.
Yeah. Yeah, we totally never knew that. We totally never knew.
Knew what?
We use literally commands
Hey!
to get blocks no one knows about, such as a structure block. Yeah, I've totally never used that before.
Did you know in Minecraft, if you smelt a piece of stone, it'll turn into a smooth stone? Or, did you know that 4 blocks of wood are actually used to craft a crafting table? Now, don't panic. I do not panic. I know this is life revolutionary for you. This is changing.
There's an allow block and a deny block?
Yeah, it allows you to break blocks or denies you to break blocks.
Case, that's gonna be case. The lie block? Oh.
I don't have any energy left to get this stuff. This is the superior way of mining, oh my god. This is the superior way of mining right here. You could literally just clear an entire veins with ease. I need 40. Nope.
No, it doesn't.
What?
If you, lightning strike a piece of TNT or engine debris, it can't leave you. Yeah. I totally don't know that.
So it strikes the TNT, or no, it strikes
Never mind, it's fake.
ancient debris. It makes more. So it says if you strike ancient debris with lightning, it will make more.
Okay,
I know it's false, but let me prove my point. You probably hear from the background. Let's see. Give me a second, guys. I'm about to prove my point. Difficulty peaceful.
What are you doing?
Board flat. On my iPad. We're gonna say that it does. Okay. Sorry, on chat. Slash. Give at a command underscore block. Summon lightning / bolt squiggly 1 squiggly, and we're gonna set this to repeating. Now a repeating block will make 20 lightning strikes per second. Now let's get some ancient debris, because ancient debris duplicates under lightning. You know, everyone knows that. Oh my god, I can't believe I'm doing this on live camera.
Okay, so how do I get the what's it called?
Lightning duplicates ancient debris. I rest my case.
How do you get...
No, I'm actually 2 years. Ready, and...
Oh, God. Oh, cool! Found it,
Lightning doesn't duplicate it. So what's the video called?
It's called... His YouTube channel name is S5.
I just found.
Is what?
57 million. Stream EYSTREEM.
You.
My guy has 5 million. Oh no, I found one of those scams. Claim free Robux. Check my channel. Man, a stream should really make a video.
What's it called?
His YouTube channel is a stream.
Is S stream?
S stream EYSTREEM.
Oh, I stream. 100. Oh my God, Jesus Christ! Yes, I think I found it. Oh yes. We all love fake. Sorry for the view. I cannot wait to see this. Oh shit, let me see the comments.
Apparently there's a scam.
Oh god. Claim every Robux and check out my channel. I like how they staff. They're stealing comments. They're assimilating.
Yeah, no.
This is unacceptable.
Wait, Red, play the girl guy. It makes you a boogie.
Everybody thinks it's impossible for a cactus to grow more than 3 blocks in Minecraft. I will show you otherwise. Did you know that minecarts are better than ladders? Did you know that you'll never get a girlfriend because you're so obnoxiously annoying and loud? Man. Okay, I'm gonna turn this down for the sake.
Sodium. I'm about to test it out.
Today, I'm gonna be dropping solid cesium into water. Hopefully this doesn't go explodes.
I have underwater. I want to know. Wait. What other things can you combine with TNT?
TNT creates vertical slabs. Oh, it's the TNT glitch. It's not a vertical slab. It's a glitched wall.
Holy crap. Can you add anything else to TNT
We
with
have 1.3 blocks.
education
There's
edition?
no way I'm making that jump. What? Bro, I got the hops. Supposedly,
He's so
if you
Calm
guys-
down there. Don't piss your pants. You made a 1.3 block jump. Calm down there. Like don't piss your pants. Careful there. I know it's I know it's like you just found you're acting like our scientists when they find a cure to freaking cancer, but you don't need to be this excited. Yeah, this is funny.
What the crap? I fooled my friend turning mom
Claim a Robux.
into Minecraft. He made a slime girl with
Oh shit.
it was big 4 days ago.
F me, check my profile. it's stealing. They're stealing comments.
Right. It says I fooled my friend turning mobs into girls. It has a slime and it has boobies. It's the stupidest crap.
Oh my god. You know, video. I think if your video gets trending, it just starts spamming the hell. Like spamming the hell out of freaking like PORN adult site bots. I've noticed that every video that it hits a trending page, like C-Day's video, got loaded with those type of bots. And they steal comments.
Alexa, how do you spell educational? I don't care anymore.
Oh, it's all up here. Ready?
Minecraft Education Edition TNT. Yeah, I'm about to. I want to see what else you can make with TNT.
Go to the mineral thing. The mineral.
Yeah, I am. I'm on. So what I got is I made the underwater TNT. What else can I make?
Balloons.
Wait, can I make balloons? I want to know how. Oh my God, he's back. Testing viral Minecraft trick that 100% works. Shows green torch with blue, purple, and red torch. Like, who is gonna fall for that clickbait? Not the veterans of this game.
Oh god, he's got 1.4 million views. He's got 5 million subs.
Yeah, stupidest thing ever.
He's got 5 mil, and I'm here with 150. F in chat.
If I could, I'd try to hack him to get that many. Just like, tell me how to make the nuke.
Literally.
Give me the TNT nuke.
Here, how to make a nuke. Waits 3 freaking hours into the video until he actually says how to make the nuke.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ, I hate those type of people.
I just want to, but you can actually make balloons in education?
You can turn your worlds into education, but you can't turn them back. Minecraft Education Edition. Literally the chemistry geeks like me in Minecraft Education Edition. How to synthesize deuteride, tritium. How to synthesize uranium.
I just want to know how to make. Do you know how to make other ones besides underwater TNT?
I know you can do it. Like there's like underwater lamps, or there's like heat lamps. There's reinforced glass.
No, I meant like different types of TNT. Is it just underwater TNT?
No, that's it. You can't make no more.
No more TNT?
No Robux. No Robux.
I want to make a.
No Robux.
You know what? How do you get a balloon?
I forgot. You have to make something known as latex.
Tennyson? Is tennis?
Tennisine.
To succeed.
What does this do? What does it do?
Tennessine is a radioactive, unstable, super heavy element. It is element 117, and it was made in Tennessee, Tennessee, yeah. And that's why its name is Tennessine.
Yeah, that's probably see why it was named here. How do you get balloons? I want
You
a
need
balloon.
this.
Do I have to mix helium and that stuff?
You need to make latex.
What's latex?
Latex is a plastic rubbery element.
Is it,
Not element, but it's a compound.
helium.
It's something known as a compound. A compound is a unison of multiple different elements.
Wait, what was it
Oh,
called?
latex.
Latex.
On the Minecraft Wikipedia, it'll actually tell you how to make a lot of the
So do they go by letters to tell which one it is?
What do you mean?
Like, does it? You know how the things that has like letters on it? Is that how you can tell what it is?
Letters? Oh, those are atomic symbols. Like Pu is plutonium, U is uranium. In fact,
Uranium bomb.
there are 118 elements on the periodic table. There's one mysterious element which I have dubbed Endurium on Minecraft, which is found in most things that do not exist in Minecraft. I'm going to goddamn die.
Copper, zinc, helium, germanium, silicium, bromine, krypton, rhodium.
Krypton.
Down to the bottom and turn on Education Edition, you'll be able to craft underwater. There you
Yeah,
go, crafting
just do
table.
that.
Let's give this a go.
Exxon, Indium, telescope, tin, indium, cadmium, silver, lemon, just looking for.
Take oxygen. Find oxygen, and then get to one stack of oxygen. Actually, no. Get one oxygen and 2 hydrogen, and put it into the lab table, whatever. Not lab table, but the compound maker.
Oh my gosh! Wait, one oxygen, and then what else? 2 what?
And 2 hydrogen.
Hydrogen. Is it near it? Is it near it?
Hydrogen is like element number 1. It is the lightest element. It is the most cheapest element to synthesize.
Okay, and then periodic table. How do you get that? Where do you get the periodic table?
No, you don't
there
get
it
the.
is. Chemistry equipment. Compound. Okay, so there's element constructor, compound creator, lab table, and material reducer.
Material reducer is really, really good. You can actually
What do I craft these?
compound maker. Compounds it unites elements into, and it's known as a compound. As I said before, compounds are multiple elements that are
So do I throw it
bonded.
in or do I?
Yeah, you put the 2 hydrogen, 1 oxygen, see what happens.
It makes water.
Yeah. Now put 2 hydrogen and 2 oxygen. It should make something known as hydrogen peroxide, also known as rocket fuel. If I'm not wrong, dihydrogen dioxide.
Put what with it?
2 hydrogen, 2
2 hydrogen, 2 what?
oxygen.
2 okay. Okay, wait. There has to be a way to get these. I don't want to just go into the giant section. There has to be a way. What? I'm just. If I type elements into the search bar, it will just show the elements.
Nah, just search up hydrogen. Hydrogen or oxygen is element number 8.
Yeah, I know, I got that. Hydrogen peroxide. So what do you use this for? Do I get it?
Hydrogen peroxide is a highly flammable compound containing 2 atoms of hydrogen and 2 2 atoms of oxygen.
Oh,
When you
yeah,
have hydrogen peroxide, it's like less than 1% pure. Because if it was pure, the moment you open your bottle, it would shoot across the frickin' room like a damn rocket.
I understand. None of this element constructor.
Go to mineral reducer, and you can start reducing some things like diamonds, stone, grass, dirt.
I'm gonna add like 22 of the neutrons. Add about
There's protons. So protons and neutrons need to remain the same. So if you want to make like try and go to make your protons and electrons. No, protons and electrons need to remain the same. Make the number of protons and electrons 92.
I went to 130.
130, you will not get anything past 118. 118 is the max number because there's, well, the what's it called, the number on the element you see, like the 100, like the at most
Keep what the same?
electrons and protons.
Electrons and protons. Okay.
The neutrons change.
$92.
I'm gonna take a break. I'm
And then what do I
gonna play some
neutrons
Subnautica.
at?
Well, just slide.